Welcome everybody, I'm Santiago Kneeland and this is The Divine Within, the invisible connection with God. Today we're going to talk about celestial and extraterrestrial beings. We're going to explore the mysterious bridge between heaven and earth, the realm of celestial and extraterrestrial beings. From midwayers and morontia worlds to the unseen helpers who guide planetary life, we'll uncover how these divine presences shape our history and individual spiritual evolution. Joining us is Susan Lyon, an author, artist, and poet whose lifelong search for truth has illuminated the beauty and order of creation. Through her spiritual journey, Susan invites us to see beyond the visible, to perceive the intricate web connecting all beings across time, space, and eternity. So welcome, Susan. It's a pleasure having you again.
Thank you, Santiago. It's fun to be here. I enjoy it.
Thank you. So this time we're going to kind of follow up on what we were talking about, the heavenly governments in our previous podcast. But this time, and since everybody's, kind of getting new information about this 3-eye atlas and the new things popping up in the different hearings. So everybody, it's kind of a fad right now. So I wanted to set this recording this podcast to talk a little bit about these celestial and extraterrestrial beings and have your take on how they work, on who are they, and how they relate to us. So I think it's a pretty interesting topic. So in our first segment, we're going to talk about celestial and extraterrestrial beings, midwayers and morontia. We open the door to the unseen. Who are the midwayers? Those beings who move between material and spiritual worlds? We'll explore how these interdimensional helpers, along with the morontia entities, reveal a larger picture of existence, one where life continues beyond matter, guided divine coordination and purpose. So what can you tell us about these celestial or out-of-this-world beings? There's different things, I think there's a lot of, we need a lot of time to break them down, but what about these celestial beings? Can you tell us a bit about them?
We do need a little time to sort them out, don't we? Um, I,
Yes.
I will say that this is an interesting thing calling them interdimensional beings because that was even mentioned recently in one of the secret meetings, the skiffs in the United States government hearings, that
Mhm.
they weren't really sure they were from another planet, but that they were dimensional beings. So to start off with, on our planet, we have native beings that are generally outside of our vision range. They're called midwayers. There are two groups. The older group that date from the times of the planetary prince,
Okay.
his are basically their parents that were created by what they called a non-sexual liaison. They
Okay.
were created by that technique, and there were 50,000 of them. They were really near to the angels in their status. They were definitely outside of our vision range, and they were very helpful for a long time. Almost 40,000 of them were lost in the rebellion. They
Okay.
went to the dark side. So there are still near to 10,000 that are loyal beings that still remain on our planet that are very helpful behind the scenes with our invisible government.
Okay.
The more recent group date from the times of 38,000 years ago when Adam and Eve lived here. Their oldest son, Adamson, and his second wife created them, um, and they were more easily visible to us. They could make themselves visible to us because they're closer to us in their being and their status.
Okay.
So anyway, they work really closely with us as well. There were almost 2,000 of them created, and only 1,111 of them remain loyal on the planet.
Okay.
So now these two groups of beings, midwayers, have united and they work together with the invisible planetary government.
Okay.
And they work with human beings to help us um, achieve that divine will, the government that we talked about in the earlier podcast.
Okay.
They are
So
native to this planet and permanent citizens here.
they stay here. Okay. So this is what I wanted to kind of differentiate them from us because I think it's interesting. A lot of people. There's a lot of references that people can understand them, because I think a lot of them it's the first time that they hear this word midwayer. So let's dive deeper into the differences between them and us, humans. So one of the things I believe, or one of the differences is, and this is in the creation of the different creatures, and we're going to be talking about more, but we come from the second source, and correct me if I'm wrong. We come from the sun, which is the second source. We as humans, and we are ascending sons of God, meaning that we start here on earth, and we have a progression of steps to go into paradise and into the center, which is to achieve, the final embrace with God. That's who we are, and that's our purpose. Then you have these beings who come from the third source, of the Trinity, which is the eternal Spirit, the Holy Spirit, and the nature. And I don't want to. I mean, we see duality and polarity in physical or human terms as female and male, but I mean, let's not just dive into that distinction, but there's a different, there's polarities, and these is a different nature than that of the second source, of the creatures of the second source, which is us. The third source is more of the natural beings, the beings, like you're saying, they stay here on this planet, and people might consider them as the spirits of the forest, all these mystical creatures that we all kind of into and see in legends and fairy tales, and every in all cultures, that they're not celestial in a way. They're not coming from heaven, and they're not angels, but they have a certain mission, and they're here to do a certain job to achieve that ultimate destiny, which is to fulfill the will of God. So it's an interesting take of that, where they come from, what their job is, and their nature. And this, I think, is something that people may understand and see where we are with, when we compare ourselves with them, right?
Right. So to sort this out, I would say we are categorized, even though, as you say, we have different polarities, we have different energy, what we call gender here, but we'll have that energy basically
Mm-hmm.
all the way, into eternity.
Exactly.
When we're classified, as you say, under the suns, we are considered ascending suns.
Mm-hmm.
That means when we either die or translate, as Elijah or Enoch did from the
Yeah.
planet, when we leave, we assume our role, in the heavens as ascending suns, even though we have different spirit, either passive or aggressive types of beings.
Mm-hmm.
So the daughters of God are the angels. That's what, as you say, under the infinite spirit. Those are considered daughters of God, and those are all creation through the infinite spirit.
Because it's interesting, once you start to see where the origin is, and the nature of that origin, then you can understand why they have certain jobs or missions, right?
Right. Now, these midwayers that we spoke of, they stay on the planet until the ages of light and life. They're the permanent record keepers here. This is truly their world, and they keep the history, and they're the ones that know actually where this comes from, that we get this information. And actually, when the days of light and life occur, they're actually released to become ascending suns like us. So
Okay.
those spirits would actually go through the same path as we do to paradise, to meet God. So they have a future destiny that's pretty great also. Now,
Yeah.
these other third group that you speak of, I think they fall into what we would call the unrevealed. And we're told that all the beings that are revealed to us have some connection to our future destiny.
Okay.
But there is a group, they say, that live near us, that they do not betray or reveal to us. So
Yes.
I think that third group that you talk about, they have no connection to our future destiny. However, they're sharing the planet with us, possibly.
Okay.
They're doing their own thing. We don't know their purpose. But we can only assume they're harmless, and
Yeah.
and we have no fear of them.
And
But
they're probably doing certain jobs, or creating certain balance, because that's the purpose of the different things that we do, how we interact. It's create that balance, right?
right, exactly. You and I have even speculated that there's all kinds of vegetable life on the planet that we see there must be some intelligence. And we feel that there could be connection with the adjutant mind spirits. And we don't know actually what's going on with them. And it's not really pertinent to our destiny or our spiritual growth, even though I think we feel an affinity to certain plant life, like trees. And, people just seem to love those things. And they really balance our life out. They produce the air that we need to breathe, and we produce the air that they need to breathe. So we're
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
It's a
rock, rock.
symbiosis. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
perfect balance. Yeah.
right. Exactly.
So, I mean, we're talking about the midwayers, which is an interesting group of creatures, beings. But now, if you expand into what we're talking about, the celestial and extraterrestrial beings, and we'd start to talk about, angels and extraterrestrial beings, because you think of angels and you see them more in a celestial way, more godly like. But then you talk about ETs, and that's more techie and more sci-fi, and then what's your take on these two beings, or how are they related? Or how? I mean, what other kinds of beings are they out there beyond the angels?
I use the term celestial for spirit.
Okay.
That's how I keep this categorized in my mind. Okay, we are terrestrial. We are from this planet. We're mortal. That's one of the things that I think that they asked in these hearings. Was it human? They're like, no, it wasn't human. Well, do they mean is it human from here or human from another planet? So we're gonna break out the truth and say there is life in other worlds, and they're human.
Mm-hmm.
And human will
Human-like, let's say, like we're the mortal beings of the earth are humans, but there's other mortal beings in other worlds that maybe are called what other name? Local, right?
I mean, whatever it is, they have the ability to know and worship God,
Exactly.
and capability of developing wisdom from that spiritual insight. That's what qualifies us, that we call human will
Mm-hmm.
dignity. And on other worlds, otherwise you're an animal, right?
Yeah.
You haven't reached that capability of connecting with the spirit. On other worlds, they have animals. They also have beings that are human will dignity that we will call human. Now, they won't necessarily look exactly like we do because they're designed for their planet, just
Exactly.
like we're designed to be comfortable on our planet.
According to the temperature, to the pressure, I mean the physical qualities, that's just simple science.
Exactly. So when I use the word extraterrestrial, I'm talking about someone that's a human will dignity from another planet.
Okay, that's a good
That's the
definition.
way I classify them.
Okay.
And then, of course, on other worlds, they will probably go through their normal phase of, because in our DNA, all of this is designed. This isn't accidental.
Yeah.
Out in time and space, God creates through designed evolution. That's in the design, there is normal, sudden mutations built into the design.
Okay.
That's sometimes when these changes take place that move us forward, and then we
Exactly.
become
It's you don't know, but there's a mechanism that it's involuntary, just like as you breathe or your heart beats. It just works, and that's the same thing. It just moves you forward, right?
exactly. And it's a nurtured process. There are celestial beings we call life carriers that nurture and guard this life until human will dignity appears. And then they are observers after that, because free will is the gift we get from God, actually. And that's universal. That's for all planets.
So it's interesting what you're saying, and in this conversation you've been mentioning, these beings called life carriers that in a way create material life and kind of steer it in an evolutionary path, from basic material to it evolves into a higher evolutionary or organic phase. But you're also talking about Adam and Eve, and that kind of isn't that contradictory? You're talking about kind of a evolution, theory of evolution, and then Adam and Eve. So how can you explain this? And that's what we're going to be talking later on. But what are these beings, these other beings that you're talking about, midwayers, and these are Adam and Eve humans? Where do they come from?
Well, I think that they fall into the category of superhuman. These are beings that have come from basically the heavens, They were divine creatures that came here. Adam and Eve came here at a certain stage in our evolutionary process where we were the original race, actually, that evolved was more like what we would consider an Eskimo look like. They were all swarthy skin color. They had black hair, black eyes. That was the beings that were here. Now we're talking long ago that these evolved almost a million years ago. And it's a lot longer than we realize. We have a history of the world, but that's the truth. It's forgotten, but we know it to be true. 500,000 years ago, this original race separated into six different races from one family. It was extraordinary. In the universe, it's extraordinary that that would happen. So we have this unusual story going on where we really are, when we say we spiritually want to be brothers and sisters, what we really don't realize is that we all come from the same family in the first place. All the races. It is totally an interesting story, but the colored races evolve on all the worlds. Usually one at a time they emerge from the original race. But in our case, 500,000 years ago, all of them emerged from one family. And at that time, the planetary prince arrived. And he arrived with a staff because he's invisible. He doesn't make himself he isn't able to make himself visible to us, but except under circumstances when he was loyal, a power director would help him make himself visible. That wouldn't happen now because no loyal power director would do that. They wouldn't work with him in that regard. So that would never happen. But anyway, so his staff created the original group of midwayers. They were volunteers. Now, this is interesting too, because they had been mortals from other worlds that had died and gone on and become citizens of our first stage training after death. And they volunteered to come back to serve on this planet for an indefinite amount of time, long term, to work with the new planetary prince on this world. 50 men, 50 women. They were given a complement that would allow them through the tree of life to live indefinitely. So we put them in the supernatural category. They had special powers, and they created the midwayers, the original group of midwayers.
And
And
well, just hold that up because this is, I mean, and I want to save this because it's a lot of information for a third segment, which is going to be on the history of the world, because this is something that you hear a lot in myth, a lot in, ancient, the lost history of the earth. You hear about these giants, about these superhuman beings, and it's everywhere. It's not only in one culture. So I think that this is a very interesting take on who these beings are, that they really existed and they did really have a purpose here other than, just being more humans like we were, but like we are. But anyways, we're going to close this segment, which is pretty interesting. This was a very good introduction into, the variety of different celestial and extraterrestrial beings that are out there, and how they interact. For our second segment, we're going to talk about the local beings. I mean, we just started talking about them, but let's dive in further on who these different beings that were born here or created here, or maybe come from different parts of the universe but have a special mission here on the planet. So here in this segment, which is the local beings of the planet, we turn our gaze homeward to the spiritual family that shares our world. Midwayers, angels, and unseen planetary guardians work quietly among us, maintaining the delicate balance between the visible and invisible. Together we'll ask, how do these local beings influence humanity's progress, and how can we become more aware of their presence in our daily lives? From what we're talking about, Susan, there's different beings, different qualities, different purposes. So what can you tell us about the local beings and of this earth? And I mean, we can consider ourselves local beings, or originating here, but who are these? Who are the beings that live or interact in our world? Either coming from outside and staying here, or originating here.
well, there's a whole
And I
bunch
know
of
it's
them.
a lot. I know it's a lot. Let's try to make a list.
There's a whole bunch to choose from. Okay, so I will say this, because of our involvement in the rebellion, we're under a spiritual quarantine. So anyone visiting the planet that is probably observing the rules to not contact us, you can assume that they are godly beings. They understand, they know the rules. So for everyone that's afraid that people are coming here from other planets that intend to hurt us, it's highly unlikely
Yeah, with bad
because
intent.
exactly they are probably observing us. We're an interesting bunch here, so there are visitors that come and observe, but they are under this restriction to contact us.
These
Uh,
guidelines, universal guidelines, they'd say, of harmony, right?
exactly. It protects them as well as allows us free will to continue to do what we're working our way through this problem in the first place. But it protects them from I hate to say it's like a disease, honestly, but rebellion is something that they protect themselves from. So anyway, it's for a purpose. There was a time when there was a connection to like I would say information circuits in the universe
Hmm.
until the rebellion when that was closed off because of this quarantine. So
It's
at
kind
some
of
future
cutting a limb or something so that you won't contaminate the rest of the body, right? It's gonna do that.
exactly, but for the people, the beings that were serving here, it also made it a little more difficult for them to serve here because they were
Okay.
cut off from normal communications as well. And that was the case of Adam and Eve. They came here to be biologic uplifters.
Okay. Biologic uplifters. This is interesting. So let me just make a small clarification here. So what you're stating is that as a part of the progression of this world, you have uh, animal origin beings that evolved from that animal origin to eventually a state, where they can worship God and have spirit receptivity, and then the different spirits start to indwell, and that's when we start evolving from just material to spiritual. And this is where you have, what are they called? What are you just called, the Adam and Eve?
Well, they are technically called material sons and
Material
daughters.
sons, and they're uplifters. They're biological uplifters. So that's what I wanted to get. So they get to a point, and their purpose is to really uplift the races and bring this, a higher graded, a newer iPhone, a higher version of spiritual receptivity and biological qualities that enhance the prior qualities and the basic structure that came out of the animal structure, right? Just in a
That's
nutshell, so that people kind of understand what we're talking about, right?
That's true, and that's normal for all worlds for them, a pair of husband and wife, Adam and Eve, to come to a world at just the right time when the life carriers say that the evolutionary races have reached their apex. Basically, they can't evolve any further
Yeah,
without.
naturally evolved. It has to be enhanced now with the extraterrestrial. And this is I mean, look at the stories that we hear, and everybody has a story that, yes, so we came from the stars. There was something planted here, and that, there was, and you look at this information that we're sharing, and it's all in there. It's more scientific, and you kind of say, this is kind of weird. But if you actually look at the ancient text, it's written all over.
Exactly, it's really true. And yeah, I know for the people that read the Bible, they say no, Adam and Eve were the first people because that's really where our recorded history begins. But that we have at least now. And but if you read carefully, you'll see that one of their sons, Cain, who slew his brother Abel,
Yeah,
went into the land of Nod and married someone from there. So they're the
yeah,
first people. Then where did those people come from? That was one of my original questions that led me to search a little deeper. And I thought, well, who are they? Yeah.
exactly.
So we know that there were other races, other peoples from before. So Adam and Eve came. They were 8 feet tall. They were called the violet race
Okay,
because they had this glow to them. They were supernatural and
okay,
beautiful. And they brought, at that point, they brought all of the humor, all of the art, all of the music that we enjoy now. all comes from them.
Like the basis for culture, for art, for the truth, beauty, and goodness in a way, right?
They really added to that our appreciation for the finer and more noble qualities that we want, for the ideal qualities. And also, just interestingly, modern genetics has discovered that, they haven't got quite the years right yet, but they've discovered a mutation that occurred several thousand years ago, where
Okay,
blue eyes, green eyes, light colored hairs emerged suddenly. That is the input from Adam and Eve. So anyone with brown hair, red hair, blonde hair, blue eyes, light colored brown eyes, green eyes, golden eyes, all of that is because the violet race is in their ancestry.
got
All
it.
of that came
Interesting.
from them.
Interesting, and that's a point. And throughout the history and the unraveling of humanity and its progression, we see the intermixing and how these we get these traits and we evolve. And it's interesting how what you're saying is that we kind of intermix. We're not just this animal origin, but we have these celestial ancestry in our tree, as well, and that creates and or enhances that receptivity for the spirit, and therefore our ability to communicate with God and to be in that progression from. And it's interesting, and you see it everywhere, from that lowly life, material life, into that celestial ultimate life. We had a podcast where we were talking about the ancient native or the Mexican traditions. As you see it everywhere, there's always the narration of their story of this lowly creature, or this basic and imperfect creature, traveling and progressing and going through trials and evolving. It's a hero's journey as well into this perfected and serving being that is in service with God. So it's really interesting. You see it there, and it's really what you're talking about. You're talking in sort of a biologic and scientific way, even though it's something that you might say this is sci-fi. But once you look at it, and you look at life here, and is it just accident, or is it more of a design, a planned design of universal harmony, rather than just a fluke? You come to think of it, it's okay. I think there's more of a thought in here than just accident, right?
Right. It's almost ridiculous to think it is accidental after you really take all the things into consideration that perfectly fit together, this grand unified theory. It's hard to ignore. I mean, you really have to. Oh, one of the things I forgot to mention about Adam
Hmm.
and Eve also is one of the key things that we benefit from, and we could have had much more of this, is during the early stages, the life carriers had problem with bacteria and viruses and that type of thing,
Okay.
becoming powerful, and they were hard to control. And they thought, no problem, when Adam and Eve come, that will all be, we'll be immune to all of that. And
Okay.
we did get some immunity from Adam and Eve, but because they were alone on the planet and basically tricked into default, we didn't get that much infusion of their immunity, to save us basically from the diseases we're seeing now that are so relevant to our,
Okay.
and a big problem for us.
That's interesting of the biological part that you're talking about, because we always talk about, the spiritual evolution, but there's also a biological evolution that has been happening in our civilization throughout history and humankind. So we're getting close to the closing of this segment. And before we move into the next part, which is quite interesting, it's the complete history of Earth. One of the groups that we have mentioned, but we really haven't talked about, and I think it's one of the most popular in all religions, is angels. So, who are the angels? What do the angels do? And what can you tell us about them?
Well, the angels are created in heaven, basically,
Okay.
and let's just say they have a mother, that creates them, and she is a daughter of the infinite spirit.
Okay.
He's a companion to the person, the heavenly person we knew as Jesus that came here. He has a
Okay.
companion, and together they create a lot of beings. but separately, she creates her angel daughters. And
Okay, this
they're
is yeah, and this is interesting. You're saying that who we know as the incarnation of Jesus, that being has a counterpart, and together they create beings. And this is interesting because a lot of there's been a lot of debates. Oh, why is God a male, and why is God? No, no, it's actually a duality. The way that they operate, it's interesting. It's not just one thing or the other. And you're saying that these two beings create certain beings, but these the angels are particularly created by this what do you want to, how do you call it? This being
well, we can call her the Mother Spirit. Let's just
the
call her
mother
that.
spirit. Yeah, and this is beautiful because it's what we have of the concept of mother nature, of mother earth. It's the mother spirit, the feminine part of divinity.
Yes, I really believe that that's where the Mother Nature term comes from. Because when you consider that we had 500,000 years ago, the planetary prince and his staff revealing certain things, they probably mentioned that, oh, no, there are angels around. You can't see them, but they're there. They're helping us. They're not, they're invisible, but they're still helpful to us. And so that, I guess, myth that has
Mm-hmm.
continued. I mean, they've always had a good reputation as being so helpful and loving to us.
Yeah,
That myth has continued, and everyone loves the idea of an angel. I mean, it's
yeah.
just
And
part of our.
and yeah, exactly. The angels, I mean, are everywhere, and you see them in all religions. So what's their job, and what when they got here, what do they do? What do the angels do really? And I think there's different types of angels, right?
There are different types of angels. They we have a more local angel that is created by our mother spirit that stays here. But that's another interesting point too. At some time in the ages of light and life, that you'll see that some of those angels actually ascend with us to paradise and become part of an eternal team. And so
Okay.
angels that are guardian angels that actually serve beings and guard them and protect them. And then there are angels that are doing certain things to move our progress forward, for our civilization. And the master seraphim, we're called seraphim angels, actually are in groups that work on specific things. And certain humans have causes that they're passionate about. They might actually be used to help along a certain task that the master seraphim are trying to
Okay.
accomplish.
So they're
Um,
like helpers. They're assigned to people in certain tasks.
well,
Is what you're saying?
people actually by their interests and their own specific interests and causes and passions might fit into a particular group task that the seraphim are accomplishing. So yeah, they
Okay.
do choose those that can be helpful to accomplish their goals. But we also have Sanibim and cherubim. People have heard of cherubim before.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
the assistants to the seraphim that guard us. They take the notes. They
Okay.
keep track when,
Yeah, it's
a
funny
seraphim
because
can.
you see, like they're the like the portray as little angels that are always, behind in the Renaissance paintings, always, on the clouds and kind of just being there, taking notes of what's happening, right?
They're helpers, and you
All
have
right.
to, assume that the seraphim take a break. They work in shifts, so there's always one on duty, but one off of duty, resting and doing their recreation or doing whatever they need to do or want to do. So we're a full time job around here. So whenever there's a guardian angel guarding someone, there's a pair, and there's always one on duty and one off duty. And if there's something going on, there's always a cherubim or stanobim that are helpful that are
Th-
helping.
And this is interesting because you usually think of, the angels and the celestial beings, and you see them these as these, ultimate and just awe-inspiring beings that just are there and you just contemplate. But they do have jobs, and you're saying, the dynamics that they do have shifts, and they have their recreation. So just from this conversation, I'm assuming that they're more like us, that we go and we do our job, and we crunch the numbers and we do what we have to do, but then we have our breaks and we have a vacation and we kind of, recoup. So It's interesting because there you're giving me the characteristics or the personalities or the qualities of these beings, and you're making them so relatable, not just these stuff, crazy stuff from heaven. I like it.
They are relatable, and it's kind of cute that you say, we're off crunching the numbers. They don't crunch the numbers. They're mathematical prodigies, remember, because they know the number
Yes.
on our head even without counting. They just know. So that's pretty cool. But they enjoy our humor as long as we're not making fun of each other. They enjoy our humor, they enjoy our music, and they have a lot of emotions that they share with us. They have empathy toward us, and they really do love us. So that's kind of cool that we know that they're close by and they're looking out for us as well.
And that's really beautiful. That it's if you want to give certain personality, or I don't want to say personality, a character or characteristics to these beings, is it's this really cultured person, suave and elegant and very gentle in his ways. You can think of that person, and yeah, because they love art and they love the finer things of truth, beauty, and goodness. So that's really beautiful, and I agree. If that's why they're called our guardian angels, and I think that's really basic, and especially in the Judeo-Christian, and even in Islam, they're the I think it's the jinns, and even in Buddhism, the bodhisattvas. I mean, it's all everywhere. There's these beings that always protect us and that guide us, and kind of represent the celestial government. So quite an interesting topic. Yes, what you were going to say, a final remark on this segment?
Oh, well, I would say that as far as us cooperating with them, I think our willingness to serve, our willingness to learn, all of that, as long as we put that forward and say to them, what could we do to help? What could
Yeah.
what can I do? I think that they will work and
They will
try to
point
bring
us in
us
the
up.
right direction. And that's a lot of the times that what we're asking in life, point me in the right direction. Don't do it for me. Just put me in the place where I can do it for me, and that's really
or
important.
or help others.
Yeah, exactly.
That's part of what's going on right now. Is I think that there are many people needed to do the work that needs to be done right now to keep us safe, to make sure that our progress goes forward and we keep everything on track. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect.
offer your help and ask for it to come. The
Yeah, and,
angels,
and in the end, as we can see, all the jobs and different positions that these beings have is really serving and helping us and other beings. So in the end, that's really our job as well, to help and serve others. So it's
right?
one happy universal family, right?
Yeah, that's how I think you can know you're on track. If you love others and you want to serve them, that's evidence
Yeah,
of your search for God and that you found Him and that you're trying to spread love through yourself, but it's really God's love.
yeah.
That's His.
You're just a conduit to it. Love it. Perfect. Well, we're gonna end with that thought in this segment. In this final segment, we go deep into the hidden past, the superhuman history of our planet. For the planetary princess staff to Adam and Eve's divine mission, Earth's story has always been intertwined with celestial intervention. We'll uncover how these beings shaped civilization, faith, and the unfolding plan of spiritual evolution, and what their legacy means for us today. So this is interesting, and throughout our conversation, we've said words, or we mentioned things like Adam and Eve, planetary prince, Lucifer Rebellion, midwayers, angels. So how do we put this together? How do we see a timeline, and how do these parts of celestial history or divine history or superhuman history have evolved in our planet? And just to note, what we're going to be doing in this part. So this is interesting, and throughout our conversation, we've said words, or we mentioned things like Adam and Eve, planetary prince, Lucifer Rebellion, midwayers, angels. So how do we put this together? How do we see a timeline, and how do these parts of celestial history or divine history or superhuman history have evolved in our planet? And just to note, what we're going to be doing in this part of the conversation, Susan, is we're going to kind of put a timeline, and we're going to show kind of the path of the superhuman history, so people kind of map it out. So in a way, take us from the beginning, if there ever was a beginning. Can you tell us a little bit of the history of our Earth, if you can, in a little bit, in a nutshell?
Well, we'll do it quickly then. Our original race, the first,
Mm-hmm.
and at 500,000 years ago, the races emerged from one family, and the planetary prince arrived with his staff.
Okay, who's the planetary prince? Just parentheses there. What
I hate
happens
to,
in this stage?
planetary prince has a name, and I hate to even say the name, but his name is Caligastia. Everyone
Mm-hmm.
refers to him as the devil.
Okay.
Let's just refer to him as the devil from now on. And he arrived with an assistant
Okay.
and his staff of 100, and then they brought with them the tree of life, and that was
Okay.
elemental to remaining alive. So the prince doesn't need that, because he's a celestial being, he's a spirit.
Okay.
And that's another thing too. Let's do quickly. He is a created son from the being we know as Jesus, from
Okay.
Michael. A lot of people give him all this power, but he is not equal to Jesus.
Exactly.
He's not equal to that creator power.
He exists, but he's not in equal stance with God, with
Right? He's
Jesus.
not an angel. He's not an angel. He is a created son of a different type.
Okay.
And just as Melchizedek's are a different type of celestial son of Jesus. Let's call him Jesus. So anyway, these beings all were created in under him and not as powerful. We know Gabriel is also a child of the mother spirit and Jesus as well.
Okay.
He's the first one. He's the powerful. He's the loyal. Anyway, so
Okay.
the devil, let's call him the devil. They went on for 300,000 years doing what they should do, and everything was progressing well. The staff had created the original midwayer core of 50,000.
Okay.
Within their DNA and within the plan for the future, the staff were going to create biologically children at some point along the way. But in those early days, there was so much work to do, and the midwives were very helpful in accomplishing that. But they were not allowed or given the permission to begin that. But that was
Okay.
a it was a meant to be a future core of leaders for us. That
Okay.
never happened in that regard. But okay, let's say that the rebellion occurred. Our
Okay.
planetary prince, the devil, joined a system-wide rebellion. At
The
that time,
Lucifer Rebellion.
the
From
Lucifer rebellion.
I think this name is more common to a lot of people. Yes.
Well, a lot of people believe that the devil i- is Lucifer and Satan, and in
Beelzebub and
the
yeah, yeah,
Bible it's Beelzebub and all these names. What they really don't understand is that they're all separate beings. Lucifer was the system sovereign.
the head of the
Satan
rebellion.
is the system. And Satan came and actually recruited the devil, Caligastia, to join. And I will say this, Caligastia had worked on Lucifer's staff before he was assigned as a planetary prince here. So he had personal relationship with Lucifer, and it's to his eternal discredit that he joined eagerly the rebellion and destroyed everything that they had built for 3,000 or 300,000 years.
Yeah.
So anyway, at that time, his staff was torn between loyalty and
The
disloyalty
war in heaven.
for war in heaven. And this included the angels, everybody that worked on the planet had to make a choice. And so about 40 of his staff, led by Van, which was the name of one of his, you know, he was a group leader, basically, of a certain responsibilities. We
Okay.
could get into that later, but Van led the loyal group, and Nod led the disloyal group.
And
That
it's funny that it's the same word that we find in the Bible, right?
in the land of Nod, right?
Okay.
So there was the tree of life was seized by the archangels and by the angels and by Van and his group, and that kept them alive for over 100,000 years.
Okay.
And they are the ones that actually worked for a long time to build the Garden of Eden and prepare it for the days when Adam and Eve would arrive. They had
Okay.
the tree that could stay alive. Now, the others, this is where some of the stories and the myths come in. The
Okay.
land of Nod, there were the people that were Nod's group went ahead and mated and created children like had been planned, but in this case, these really were superhuman beings. And it talks about them, the mighty men of old, the men of renown.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
all of that happened, and they said they knew they didn't have the tree of life to stay alive. So the only way they could preserve their race was to go ahead and mate and have children, even though they didn't have permission to do that yet.
Okay.
And that was part of the process to survive. Now, I will say at one point, one part of that group broke away and went back to the loyal group of Van. They
Okay.
realized they had made a mistake. And so part of the Nod group were good. And so now you mentioned giants earlier. That was a natural evolution thing that came out of the orange and green races.
Okay.
That was built in basically to the evolutionary process. But so there is stories and myths of giants, and it really was true. There were giants, but these ancient beings. Now, a lot of people will say, "Where did this Egyptian culture come from that's so far advanced?" And
Yeah.
where did the Mayan culture come from? And this and that. Well, many of those ancient cultures were the supernatural cultures that had
Exactly.
evolved over time from this group of the Nodites that had, they were responsible for the Tower of Babel that people know in the Bible. They couldn't agree about, w- they couldn't agree. So they separated. Anyway, so they moved to different places and all that. But the second group of superhumans that we really can track is from Adam and Eve's oldest son. After, they defaulted in their mission, they were tricked. He moved away to try to find the good Nodites. He had heard about the stories in his childhood. He knew where to find them. He found them, and he found a pure line Nodite woman that had come down from all the way from the staff. I mean, a pure line. And when they married, their children every fourth one was invisible. Now I know this sounds crazy, but they
Yeah.
when they married, their children were the second group of midwayers. They were actually
Okay.
invisible.
So they had that quality. Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah,
So wait, before I mean, because you're now talking about Adam and Eve's son, so you're talking about this evolution in the history, and we get to the rebellion, and suddenly you have this war, and you have this loyal group, and kind of retook power, and there's just like a civil war, let's say, and not it's
definitely.
there's no control, and then you have these biological lifters, which are the material son and daughter Adam and Eve that come and uplift the races, right? That's the history.
That's right. Well, and Adam and Eve's, all of their progeny, you
Yeah, their
can
offspring. Yeah,
look right back to them for all of the ancient cultures that were like we look at and say, where did they come from? All of that is the result of Adam and Eve's blood.
yeah. You see it
What
everywhere. It's I mean, and this is very popular right now. Everywhere you see it in YouTube and all the different channels. It's this ancient alien history and ancient civilizations, and every story has these cataclysm, which you can see it. I mean, if there was a rebellion and there was this default and this conflict, that's what we hear in the stories of history and why don't we have the record straight, because there was a lot of confusion. I mean, imagine it was one of the biggest wars. What kind of confusion and distortion and destruction are you going to have if that happens? So it's pretty interesting to understand all this and to see how everything evolved. So you're saying that there's this rebellion, then Adam and Eve come and they try to do their stuff, which is try to uplift, but they have a default, which is what? Maybe they didn't bite an apple per se, right? But they defaulted. They did commit a crime, right?
it they had a mission to come here and to
Okay.
to have children. They had actually children on the system headquarters before they came here and were assigned and volunteered for this work. They had worked in the labs of the life carriers. They were genetic specialists, biologic experts. That's how, in the biblical story, Adam was able to name all the
Yeah, exactly. That's
animals.
the point of naming because he's
Yeah,
creating the animals.
he really awed everyone because they both actually were equal in their expertise. But they awed everyone at that time because they knew everything already and spoke to them in their own language, even. And they were just in awe of them and wanted to worship them immediately because they were so, we tend to want heroes and we want someone
Exactly.
to worship, obviously in
Exactly.
those days long ago. But all of their kids, and they were instrumental in developing all of those ancient civilizations that were so wonderful. And gradually, as the bloodlines absorbed into the evolutionary races, they lost their power, they lost
Yeah.
their excellence, basically, and they devolved back to a normal evolutionary stage. Now, if the mission had been that they would build up their race, the violet race, to a half a million, and then those children, not Adam and Eve themselves, but those children would go out into the world and select the best, and through that method, and it was very controlled and it was very intentional to help eliminate disease and to create a really strong and noble race. And they went off the rails really quickly within
Uh,
100 years or
And let me
so.
and let me make a disclaimer here. By creating a great race, we're not saying just one type of race. We're talking about the mixing of all races that really brings the best race in everything. It's not excluding a race; it's including all races to become the best. The best qualities of all races come out and make the best every iteration. You get a better part of the past,
Right.
right?
And exactly. Each race has many, many strengths that would contribute to the eventual amalgamated race that I mean, in the times of the ages of light and life, they think that we will have one language, one faith, one race. And of course, that's, far in the future. But the goal is to become amalgamated, and all races are going to be involved in that. We're already blending. So it's not to exclude anyone, but to include everyone. Back to, we're the same family anyway. So there's no sense in saying anyone's superior.
Yeah, yeah,
It
exactly.
doesn't true. We're all
So
brothers and
so what happened then? What was the default of Adam? And I think, I mean, this is when you tell us about this, we're gonna leave the history of our Earth in Adam and Eve because there's a lot of more history. But I think that's gonna be in another podcast because I don't want to cut short Melchizedek, Jesus, or any more of the history. But let's close this off with what was the default? What was that apple that they ate?
okay. The problem was, and they had been warned repeatedly by the angels that were on duty, to just Adam and Eve were to only mate with each other and to create the pure line children. And then the pure line children, without disease or without any problem like that, were able to mate with each other with no problems. Like,
Okay.
human evolutionary would have a problem if they mated with brothers and sisters, but they didn't have that problem because they were perfect specimens, and they without disease or without any weakness at all. So Adam and Eve, they were cut off from the communications from outside. They had angels that were here that were,
But
you
why
know,
were they cut off? What happened? So they were told not to accelerate and to keep so what happened?
they were told specifically to stay with their mission to get to 1 million or 1/2 million. Adam and Eve never to mate with anyone else, only with each other. And what happened was Eve was tricked into a secondary plan to mate with a an evolutionary male that was chosen, and it was put to her as, how much sooner could
How
they
faster
get,
can you accelerate this process, right?
and I think we're used to this in our history. For peaceful methods, kings used to send their daughters to marry the prince of another country so that there would be an alliance between them, a working alliance that was peaceful. And that was put to Eve in that manner, that we had this alliance and you had a child, with this people, then you could count on them to be helpful to you, because it wasn't easy in those days.
Yeah.
The devil was strategizing against them at
You have
every
to
turn.
think it's a civil war. There's a confusion. There wasn't Jesus wasn't here yet, and there was a lot of things happening. Yeah,
That's true, and the rebel midwayers were wreaking havoc,
yeah,
as
yeah,
well, against Adam and Eve.
yeah. There
So
were there were actually like even still they were pushing and how they're influencing some of the times what happens nowadays. So they influenced her and she defaulted. And basically what you're saying is that she procreated with somebody other than Adam, and that
right.
broke everything. She defaulted, and what happened? This is interesting.
It's a very sad story because, she believed she was doing well. She didn't mention it to Adam, and that had been warned to her over and over and over again, that things were tough, but never do anything separate from Adam, unless you've consulted with him and you both agree. They both were warned not to do anything separately, that they would help each other, but he thought, things were very tough. He was so busy working, trying to establish relationships with groups around that were very hostile.
Yeah,
It was not the norm for them when they arrived on this planet. They had been warned it was going to be tough, but I think they didn't realize just how tough
how tough? Yeah,
it was.
exactly. And uncommunicated civil war. I mean, it's tough, and they took a bad decision, and that they defaulted. Yeah,
Right. And so she went through with this, and immediately the angelic, hosts were in a, they knew there was a problem. And Adam sensed it immediately, and he came and he said, what happened? He could tell there was a problem. And she admitted what she did. And they knew that, other than the perfect way is evil. And that is a default of their perfect mission, their oath. And so he decided, now he had a choice at this point. This is very sad because he loved her so much, he wanted to share her fate. They didn't know exactly what the fate would be at that time, but he knew he loved her so much that he wanted to share her fate instead of staying here alone if she was taken from the planet, or he didn't know exactly what would happen. So he found a woman that was an evolutionary woman and mated with her at the same time, so that no matter what happened, he and Eve would remain together.
yeah. They were both guilty, like Romeo and Juliet. They both drank the poison, right?
It's really a true love story between the two of them, but actually it made a big difference in the future health of our people. If Adam had been able to stay and he was still alive now, and there could be a much greater, amount of his blood,
Yeah,
and
history
you
would
know,
be different. Yeah,
yeah,
but this is interesting, and we're about to finish off, and because we're gonna take it later from this part on the default, and where you're gonna tell us what happened afterwards. But I just wanted to close off with, reflection on the story of the Garden of Eden. The tree of life, the snake, the serpent, which is the devil, and the temptation. And as a kid, I always, and I love archetypes, and I study a lot of the mythical archetypes, and to me, the serpent always represented like a sexual symbol. It wasn't really the apple, and to me, it was like kind of elemental. Oh, you bit an apple, and the forbidden fruit, and you look at human interaction, and the forbidden fruit is really, thou shalt not covet your neighbor's wife. And I mean, it's more along on those lines. So you have that element of the forbidden fruit, you have the element of the snake, which is sexuality, and in a lot of cultures, that's the snake, that's how it's represented. So you see that the story, this story that you told us, that it has to do with a sexual default. The clues are in the story. The serpent, the forbidden fruit, everything. If you look really at the mythical archetype of the story of Adam and Eve, of Garden of Eden, it's written in there. There is the story of that default. Maybe it's not that they were the first humans, and that's where we are all originated. There were a step in this vast history of the universe, of the earth, actually, that we now understand much clearer.
Right. And that goes back to the tree of good and evil. And,
Yeah,
I mean, honestly, it's not a fruit. It's making a choice that's evil, and
exactly, exactly.
yeah, was not
Yeah.
according to the mission.
Yeah, yeah, I love that, how, and that's what's beautiful, and why we shouldn't take the Bible or any religious text, the myths, and because there's clues in them of what really was happening, and of course, throughout thousands of years, everything gets graded down, or distorted in a way. But if you take it down, and you look at the mythical archetypes of the structure, the information is there, and it's really beautiful, and really resounds differently with all different people. So
Yeah,
really excited about this, Susan, and we have a lot of stuff to continue. So we're gonna have to do a second part of this and talk a little bit more on the history of our world, and then I want to talk about the interaction, how we interact as humans with all these celestial beings, because I think it's interesting why what kind of job we do with each one. That's kind of fun. All right.
that'll be fun. I would like to say real quick for those that are
Sure.
listening, there is a happy ending for Adam and Eve. So we'll tell them all about that later.
Yes, same time next, same channel. Yes, we're gonna tell you the what eventually happened, and then the next part of the story of the Earth. All right,
Sounds
but
good.
thank you, Susan. This was really lovely. It's a pleasure as always. Really enjoyed it.
I did too. Thank you.
And thanks everybody for watching. Like always, subscribe if you liked it. Be sure to also put the notifications, so you know when we're gonna take out a new information, new program. And thanks for watching. Tell people that if you liked it, what you saw over here, maybe they might be inspired. And thank you. I'm Santiago Kneeland. Take care and carpe diem. On the Divine Within podcast, we'll share real conversations to help you find a personal connection with God. My goal is to support your faith, growth, and journey toward discovering the divine within yourself. Join us to deepen your faith and spiritual journey.